Season 3. It is now mid-September, and that means some of you are already a month into the semester. I hope everything is going well so far. And for those who are applying to programs this winter, now's the time to be putting together your materials. So I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of great resources that are out there. If you don't already know about MFA Draft, the Facebook group dedicated to all things MFA applications, I would definitely check it out. That was a big resource for me when applying. The moderators start a new group each cycle, and MFA Draft 2023 is already in full swing. And if you are an underrepresented writer, I highly recommend checking out MFA App Review, which does amazing, commendable work every year. And finally, if you haven't yet, I suggest you check out our special episodes on MFA applications. One with Katie Vishniak, editor-in-chief of readtheworkshop.com, and another with Gregory Spatz, director of the MFA program at Eastern Washington University. Each episode offers a ton of useful information. Good luck on those applications. You can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. Soon, on our website, you'll also find ways to support us financially, if it's within your means. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with Emily St. Martin. Emily is an independent journalist based in Los Angeles, California. She's written for the New York Times, InStyle Magazine, Cosmopolitan, Vice, Los Angeles Magazine, The Fix, The Hollywood Reporter, People, and other places, including for the Southern California News Group, where she won a third-place award for Best News Feature with the LA Press Club in 2022. She has a BA in journalism from the University of La Verne, and is currently pursuing an MFA in creative nonfiction in the University of California, Riverside's Palm Desert Low-Residency program. Today, she's brought an excerpt of a piece to read for us.
This piece is from my memoir that I'm working on in the program called Disgraceland, and this is a bit from Chapter 4. Ron Jeremy had dozed off again. He was sitting in the maroon cushioned booth with a random group of patrons picking at the food on their table. He closed his eyes and dropped his chin to his grease-stained shirt, jerked his head up, and let it fall again. His breathing sounded like a snore. The patrons exchanged confused glances, gave him a gentle nudge, and said, "You okay, Ron?" He snapped out of it and picked up another fry. The Rainbow Barn Grill was a time capsule, dusty and nostalgic, cramped with the lingering souls of rock stars, porn stars, industry insiders, B-listers, C-listers, groupies, and wannabes. The dingy old carpet, debauched walls, and clouds of cigarette and marijuana smoke were a constant through decades of Sunset Strip nightlife. The restaurant was a rock and roll staple, and in 2011 sat sandwiched between the Key Club and the Roxy. Bands who played there, comedians who performed at the Comedy Store would finish their gigs and head to the Rainbow. The ticket buyers trickled in after them. I waited for their arrival and served them when they came. Ron Jeremy was my least favorite regular. He always looked dirty with smears of ranch dressing on his sweats and grease in his stringy hair. He had narcolepsy and napped during his nightly visits. A fixture in the adult entertainment industry since the late 1970s, he had been named by Adult Video News the #1 porn star of all time, topping both Jenna Jameson and John Holmes. But really, he was a walking, talking caricature. He had performed in over 1,600 adult films and made many media appearances to keep his pop culture relevance alive. The tourists were thrilled to see him. The regulars and restaurant staff, not nearly as much. Ron was entitled and oblivious. He made this clear in the way he ate from strangers' plates, plopped himself down in their booths, and groped their bodies with an arrogance that assumed his touch was welcomed and enjoyed. "It's called the Ron Jeremy Tickle," he told my friend Lauren. "Huh? What is?" she asked, sipping her drink. She was standing next to the bar on the back patio, and Ron was making his rounds. He He slid behind her and leaned in close, leaving a sloppy, wet kiss in the sweet spot of her neck just below her ear while taking a handful of her ass. She shuddered and stepped away. "The Ron Jeremy tickle," he said proudly, like her shudder was of sexual gratification rather than disgust. Then he took her hand and cupped it with his, using them both to grab his dick and give it a shake. Its outline through his sweats was massive, intrusive even, and made both of their hands look small. I tried to steer clear of Ron. His greasy presence made me anxious, and the thought of his eponymous tickle nauseated me. I drank mudslides and champagne during my shifts. I also dipped into the bathroom every now and then to take a hit of dope. I kept a folded sheet of tinfoil inside my black apron with the heroin already melted into place. I'd work through a small nugget of tar over the course of my shift, enough to get by, but not so much as to make me nod off like Ron. It didn't occur to me that anyone would notice or object. The culture at the Rainbow was emblematic of why I had been drawn to Hollywood in the first place. Drugs weren't shocking there. They were the norm. It didn't take long for my manager to switch me from being the on-call server to having a schedule of my own. I was good with my tables, thrived as a mainstay, and I genuinely loved coming in to work my shifts. The 80s Hollywood fug of the Rainbow suited me, and I wasn't nearly as jaded as the longtime service had become. While some of the girls would kick out the patrons that lingered, knowing that turning over their tables meant bringing home more money, I'd linger alongside my customers, content to have people who enjoyed my presence and willing to avoid any kind of fuss. A few weeks into the job, David Spade was standing up inside his booth toward the back of the main dining room, looking up into the lamp that dangled overhead. "Can you unscrew the light bulb over the table while I'm here?" I'm not sure if I can do that," I said, "but I can ask." He didn't want the tourists interrupting his meal with requests for photos. Some celebrities really flipped their hair over how put upon they were, or rather, imagined they might be. Some were gracious, but many who frequented the Rainbow were odd and out of touch. "That would be great," he said with a flamboyant wave of dismissal. I walked up to the front counter where Ruby, the house mother of Rainbow servers, sat at the register. She was mostly aloof, at times abrasive, and never took shit from anyone. Ruby, am I allowed to unscrew that light bulb for David Spade?" I pointed to the back where he was now outside his booth, mingling with the tables that neighbored his. "What the fuck?" she said. "No." "Okay, got it." I walked back, not wanting to tell David Spade no, but he seemed to have forgotten all about it by the time I returned. "They want me to leave the light bulb in," I said. "What?" "Okay, sure," he said, turning back to the people he was entertaining in the aisles. Celebrities rarely tipped well. I don't think Ron even paid. Some asked that their meals be comped. Sometimes I wondered if the Rainbow was where celebrities gathered when their careers had faded, when they didn't have much left but each other and the few tourists who still recognized them. Within these walls, it was as if time stood still, and I figured that was why they came night after night. At the front of the main dining hall, Frank Stallone and Chuck Zito, an actor and bodyguard famous for his fistfight with Mickey Rourke, sat in the cushioned ambiance of the fire. Night after night, their seating arrangements always the same. Lemmy from Motorhead sat in the same seat at the patio bar. Night after night, his Fu Manchu collecting foam and a veil of tobacco smoke and twinkling Christmas lights shrouding him like an angel's glow. If anyone else tried to fill his stool, the bartender would say, "No, that's where Lemmy sits." The same regulars would come in wearing the same ensembles and greet each other like they hadn't seen each other in ages, always with an enthusiasm that suggested they were doing something out of the ordinary. The more time I spent there, the more time seemed to slip away.
Emily, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for reading that, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I can't wait to read your memoir based on that excerpt. It sounds super interesting. And as you know, listeners can probably tell from this excerpt, you're not a writer that shies away from examining the dark corners of life. So it makes for really fascinating reading. But I imagine there's also some discomfort as a writer, knowing that the public will be reading your often very personal stories. So what draws you to do this, to put yourself out there by writing creative nonfiction?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. And I've been asked it a million times, so it's funny that I never know quite how to answer that. It's really more of a compulsion. I feel like, I'm the one at parties who's always oversharing. And so I just feel like it's part of my personality or something. And while it can get awkward at parties, it turns out to work out for me with writing.
Yeah. I mean, before the interview, you had mentioned to me that there is a magic that comes from writing something that makes you terribly uncomfortable to write and absolutely terrified to have read by the public. What is that magic? Could you describe it?
Yes. Okay. So I feel like, for me personally, all of my best pieces that came out that had the most surprising reception where I was getting, private messages and DMs and emails from tons of people being like, thank you so much for writing this. Oh my gosh, I related to this so much, or I really needed to read this today, were all pieces that the day that they came out, I cried in my closet because I was so freaked out and I didn't want anyone to read them. And I was like, what's going to happen?
Right.
Yeah. So I would say that that's the magic there. I feel like always for me, when I'm worried that someone is going to hate me or judge me, or I'm going to ruin my career by putting something out there, it's usually the exact opposite. And that's where the magic happens. It's almost like it's a sign now when I can tell that I'm getting scared and I'm feeling really uncomfortable that I'm on the right track.
Wow. No, I totally understand that. I think, I've definitely felt that when reading people's work before, right? It's something about like the vulnerability of a writer, like the willingness to put themselves out there and tell it exactly how it is. Those things that like maybe are true about ourselves too, but that, we don't have the courage to say out loud. To see a writer doing that, being like, this is real life. This is exactly how it is. There's something really freeing and really electric about that.
Yeah. And I think it took me a long time to become a writer because I was, working at the Rainbow doing heroin. And so when I finally stopped doing that, I had a lot of shame about the way that I had been living my life. And it was really hard for me to get over that and really hard for me to kind of rejoin society, because when you're living that way, you're really such an outcast of society, and it's really, really hard to cross back over. And so I think that writing kind of allowed me to let go a lot of that shame and kind of just own it and find the beauty in it and find the ways that it is relatable or it is interesting, or maybe it uncovers something about the culture of a place or the culture of a time or of a generation in a way that no one should feel shame about, that it's just emblematic of what everyone is living through.
Right. Well, you wrote a really amazing piece for Vice titled "My Father Died and Then I Fell in Love with Heroin." And you can talk as much or as little about that as you'd like. But I'm curious at what point you started writing and what role, if any, that played in your recovery.
Okay. So funny story. When that piece came out, that was one of the ones where I like freaked out and cried in my closet, because when I pitched that piece, I pitched it as falling in love with heroin, right? And they asked me for like a couple of photos from that time to include in the piece. And then when the piece came out, they had changed the title from Falling in Love with Heroin to My Father Died and I Fell in Love with Heroin, and had the main photo, like this giant close up of my face. And then Vice made it like their main story. So on all of Vice's websites, it was just like my giant face being like, my father died and I fell in love with heroin. And I was like, oh no. And I was just freaking out. Oh God. But again, that was one of the ones where it like, I think that was my first main story where I really put myself out there and like put my face to that label. And Vice ended up sharing it all over the world. I was getting messages from Germany that I had to translate to read, being like, thank you for sharing this piece. It was incredible. Like, and it really kind of made me catch this bug for like, okay, this, even though it's scary, this is important. Like I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right thing here. Right.
Okay. So, you've written about dating, motherhood, and breaking up fights, losing one of your best friends to the modern American cyber cult QAnon, post-gender fashion on TikTok, addiction, drugs, food, and Hollywood, just to name a few of the subjects you've tackled. So you talked a little bit about when you're writing something, maybe you feel that sense of nervousness and that it's an important thing to write about, that it might be good. But what do you look for when you're considering whether or not an experience is worth even starting the process, starting to write about? Like, how do you know you want or need to write about something and that it will work for a piece?
So I feel like all of my pieces have come up in really random ways. With the falling in love with heroin, then my father died and fell in love with heroin piece. That one I was really compelled to write. I think that I had been holding all of that inside of me for a long time. And so that was one that I really just sat down and felt compelled to write. And then I ended up sending it around, hoping that it would get published. And with the other ones, though, they all came about in kind of funny ways. I feel like a lot of trying to be published as a writer and writing essays and opinion pieces. And it's really about the timing and kind of being very aware of what people are talking about and what publications are putting out there and being able to strike when it's hot. And so with I lost a best friend to QAnon. People were talking about that. I noticed a lot of people were losing family members and best friends because of this crazy political divide. And it had just happened to me. And so I felt like the timing was right. That's often the case. I mean, if I see something in the news or I watch a movie that is like, oh my gosh, I could add to this discussion, then I just try to hit it while I can, because that's usually your best bet of getting published, in my experience, is when you're contributing to a conversation that's happening right then. With the piece that I wrote for Los Angeles Magazine, Hungry and Loaded on Hollywood Boulevard, that one's actually funny because I took a food writing class because I was sick of writing about drugs. And so I ended up writing about food and drugs on Hollywood Boulevard. But that's actually my favorite piece I've ever written. And so that just came out of a class that I took. And so, yeah, I think they just kind of pop up. And I wouldn't say that any experience is not worth writing about. I just think that you have to find the time for when it's relevant.
Okay, so that makes sense if you're writing a piece that you're going to publish in that moment. But what about for the memoir that you're writing? How do you decide which experiences to include in that? Is there a process for actually deciding what to include, or are you just putting it all down and then going to figure that out later?
Okay, that's a good question, because I've actually gone through this so much since I started the program. So after that piece came out with Vice, my father died and I fell in love with heroin. That was my first major piece that I ever had. I was very green, and I had a literary agent reach out to me after that and say that they wanted to see a proposal from me. We had this great conversation on the phone for an hour, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a famous writer. It's going to be so great. And I had no idea what I was doing, and I Googled how to make a book proposal, and I had a friend who was published who sent me her book proposal, but I didn't understand the genre at all. I made this book proposal that was chapter 1, I was born on this day. Chapter 2, I was 2 years old, and it went through literally my entire life. It had, 33 chapters. It was absurd because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't,
Right.
And obviously the proposal was turned down and I was devastated, and it was a whole thing. But I really learned a lot from that experience, and I can't even bear to go back and look at that proposal because it's so cringy to me now. But I learned that with memoirs, you really have to have a narrow focus. So, I feel like I could probably write 5 different memoirs with all of my life experience, because all of those experiences are worth something, but they don't belong in one memoir. They belong in 5 different ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, with this last one, or my current one, I should say, it's really just finding what's most relevant to this story, to this specific story that I'm trying to tell. And when I started the program, wrote a gazillion chapters that I ended up cutting. And I'm just really trying to cut it down, cut it down, cut it down. So it's really narrow and really sharp. And the story is very clear cut.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So it sounds to me like maybe that has been a positive for you in the program, kind of becoming more aware of how to structure a memoir?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, well, in part of the program, and I mean, I've always been a reader, but part of this program is you have to read like 5 books a month,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I have twin daughters, and I work part-time as a freelance journalist, and it's really hard to read 5 books a month and try to write your own book and try to do all of that. But it has helped me so much. Oh my gosh, just reading other people's memoirs and seeing the way that they really narrow in on a period of time and the story that they want to tell, and realizing that it's not like a biography, it's a memoir.
Right. Okay, well, we'll talk a little more about the MFA program in a minute, but let's talk about that freelance journalism career that you have. Because one thing I think that writers both inside and outside of MFA programs worry about is if and how they'll be able to make a career or a living from writing. And you did build this freelance career before joining the MFA. So I'm wondering if you could talk about when you first started doing that, how you were able to build that career, and maybe share any advice you might have for listeners who are considering a similar path.
Sure. Okay, so I feel like for context, I should say that I was living in Hollywood and I was addicted to heroin and my life was insane. And then I ended up getting pregnant with twins. And right after they were born, I enrolled in community college online that fall. By the way, I was a single mom of twins as well. So I knew at the time, I knew that it was like me, you know? And so I was so worried. I would look up jobs that I would want. Like I remember Googling LA journalism jobs and I found like the Hollywood Reporter, and I saw that they wanted you to have like 3 years of experience as a published writer as well as a degree. I was like, oh my God, by the time I finish my degree, then I'm going to have to like build up 3 years of writing experience. And then I'm not going to be able to work until I'm like 35, and I was just freaking out. And I'm like, I've wasted so much time doing heroin in Hollywood that like now I have to like make up for all this lost time, And so I really tried to start getting published while I was going through school. And the first place I wrote for like really goofy little pubs. I wrote like episode recaps for this pub called Fansided. I made no money. And I wrote for this mental health blog about verbal abuse in relationships, which I normally would never be like, I want to write about verbal abuse in relationships, but I was just like, I want to be published. And so I got, I think, $25 a piece for that. But I did that for as long as I could and as often as I could, just so I could build up the experience and kind of beef up my resume. And so it just worked in my favor because I had this mentality of like, I have to make up for lost time. I've wasted so much time. I need to be able to be employable by the time I actually have a degree and not have to like start with this like blank canvas fresh out of school.
So those smaller jobs that you had at the beginning, even though they weren't paying much, did you find that they were like helpful to you in like building that career? Like, is that something you would recommend? I mean, it doesn't sound great from the outside, right? But maybe it's beneficial to your writing, right?
Oh, it's not glamorous, but honestly, it really helped me to navigate the freelance world professionally because, I mean, and I've seen friends go through this as well, but when I first started getting published and having to work with editors, some editors were like really enriching my work. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such an amazing relationship. And then some editors were like, there was this SEO editor that would make my work really weird because they were trying to like repeat words for the SEO searches. And I would like cry over it and get in fights with them. And it was just so unprofessional and ridiculous. And I would be like, I'm going to start my own publication. This is bullshit. And yeah. It's so funny because years later, I see my friends doing exactly that. And I'm like, oh, they're just new, I've been there. I remember that. But it really helped me like prepare and get used to being a professional in this industry and learning how to navigate those relationships. And all of that's important. So important.
Okay, so you tested out of high school after your sophomore year because you say you hated it. But then you went to community college at 25, transferred to the University of La Verne, got your journalism degree, and now you're in a graduate program. So What do you think your 16-year-old self would think about all the time you spent in school at this point?
Well, I don't think I ever hated high school because of like the academics. I always loved learning, and I hated high school because I was, I had a lot of social problems. I had like a headgear and a toothpaste allergy. I was bullied terribly. And then like all of a sudden I got my braces off and I saw the dermatologist and he fixed my thing. And then I hit puberty and I grew giant boobs. And then it was like, and then all of a sudden people didn't hate me for my headgear anymore. They hated me because I had giant boobs and everyone accused me of having a boob job. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't deal with this. It gave me so much anxiety and just like a miserable existence, just trying to navigate that social world of high school. And, I also never really liked rules that I felt were arbitrary. And so that aspect was hard for me. I loved the learning, but I hated stupid things like, just weird, quirky rules that didn't make sense to me. And so you have to deal with that much less in college than you do in high school. I think I just rebelled, I guess, and wanted to do my own thing. But it wasn't because I didn't love learning.
There you go. So what made you decide to pursue the MFA?
Well, I got my journalism degree and I graduated in spring of 2020. And I had always envisioned that I would go off and get some job at a newspaper or a magazine in LA. But we were in the middle of a pandemic and things were crazy and layoffs were rampant in the media industry. And I was scared of being idle because that's my personality. I just can't, if I have nothing to do, I just start getting in trouble. So I was like, okay, maybe I should get my MFA. And I made the decision in like a day.
Well, you ended up at the Low-Residency MFA at UC Riverside, which is based out of the Palm Desert Center. It's a 2-year program. You're focused on creative nonfiction, but they also have tracks in fiction, playwriting, poetry, and screenwriting. So what was it about the Low-Residency option that appealed to you?
Well, we were in the middle of a pandemic. Also, I have 2 kids, and I just felt like being able to study online for the majority of the time worked best for me. And we get to go to a residency for 10 days in June and 10 days in December. And that's in Palm Springs. And so obviously that appealed to me as well. I was like, oh my God, that sounds fun. So yeah, I found the program online and I shot the program director an email and he called me and we chatted for like an hour about the program and we're just like shooting the shit. And I was convinced I wanted to join and he was like, well, don't be hasty. And I'm like, but I make all my decisions with haste, And I think I applied for the program the next day. And yeah, I'm so glad I did. It really, really changed my life in such a positive way. And I've grown so much as a writer. Oh my God. I feel more and more confident all the time. And the faculty is so amazing. And I just feel very enriched by both my peers and the faculty.
So yeah, it's interesting, like joining a program during the pandemic, because in a sense we were all in a low residency program there for a while, right? Like I was in a program that was in person, but like for a year and a half we were completely online. So, essentially I had that experience too. So I could see how that could factor into the calculus.
Well, and also none of us really knew how long we were going to be living that way. Everyone was like, oh, it'll be over by October. It'll be over by this time. My husband is a scientist. And so he was like, no, it's going to be like this for a while, but it just seemed like it made the most sense.
Right. Well, I'm curious also to hear about that conversation you had with the director of the program before you applied, because I don't think that that's a normal experience. I think for most people who are applying to MFAs, they're like struggling to get as much information about programs as possible. Like they would love to talk to someone at the program, but it's not really available to them. So like, I don't know. Is it just a matter of being more proactive? Like, did you like mention in the email like that you wanted to talk to them, or was this just a lucky scenario in which the person reached out to you?
I think Todd is just really great this way. I mean, maybe I'm lucky. I don't know. Maybe other people in the program are going to listen to this and be like, what the fuck? But no, I think it's just Todd. I think Todd is just great. I mean, he hadn't even read any of my writing yet, and he called me and talked to me for a while. And he really sold me on the program because it's different than other programs in the sense that it really sets you up to publish. So while you're there, you're working on your thesis the whole time, which is basically the book that you're going to try to get published at, or the screenplay or whatever that you're going to try to get published at the end of the program. And during your last quarter, Todd has different agents and publishers and authors come out, and you have the chance. Everyone reads all your work. You turn in 50 pages of your work and a proposal, and everybody reads everything you've done. And then you get to have these meetings with them, these professional meetings. And so it just felt like the right thing for the stage that I was at, and then also you get to study like whatever you want. I mean, the last residency that I was at, one of my friends was graduating, and her whole grad lecture was about like vampire lit. And like, that's what she's basically made her MFA about, and my grad lecture will be say yes to drugs in literature. And they let me do that, they let me just study drug lit. And so they're really cool about just like letting you be you and trying to embrace that and help you grow.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple times that you've had a really good experience with the professors. So I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about that. Like, what have been some like specific things that you felt the professors have worked on with you that, have really helped you while you've been in the program?
Well, certainly craft, because I'm used to writing articles and essays that are usually between 1,000 and 1,500 words. When I sat down to try to write a book, it was very fast and it was bad, And so they would be like, you have to slow down, you have to slow down. And I had no idea what that meant. And I was like, you guys, I'm a journalism major. I've never done creative nonfiction or fiction. Like I have to have you break it down for me because I don't know what slow down means. I literally don't know what you're telling me, and I don't know how to do what you're telling me. And they would like make lectures just for me on like how to accomplish that. And, I minored in fiction and I had no idea how to write fiction. And I wrote my professor and was like, hi, I don't know how to write fiction. Maybe in like one of the lectures you could do like a fiction 101. And he was like, oh yeah, I should do that, huh? Because a lot of people are coming from backgrounds where they've already been doing that, but I didn't. I came from journalism. So it's very different. And I was definitely pretty lost at the beginning, but I caught up quickly because they were all like really receptive to everything I was asking and everything I was saying. And I just feel like they're all so brilliant too. I mean, I'm sure everybody says that about their professors, but I've really just like idolized them because they're so smart and they show such genuine like interest in my work, which is so important and encouraging. And yeah, I just feel really lucky that I ended up with them. I mean, I have like David Hewlin and Mark Haskell Smith as my professors right now. And they're just, they're like icons. I mean, David Hewlin is an icon, and Mark Haskell Smith is one of the best, funniest, most amazing people ever. And I'm just really lucky.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds wonderful. And, you've mentioned a couple times now that you're a mother of twins who, if my math is correct, must be around 8 years old by now.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So I'm curious, how do you balance your work as a journalist and a mother alongside the classwork and writing required for the program?
Gosh, I don't know. That's such a funny question because it's like, I don't know. I just do it. Like, I feel like whenever people are like, how do you do something? It's like, you just do it because you have to, There are a lot of nights where I'm up till 2 o'clock in the morning. There are a lot of days when my daughters are mad at me because I'm working all day. It's hard to balance. Sometimes I don't balance very well. Sometimes I miss all my deadlines because I know that the girls need attention. And some days the girls are mad at me because I'm prioritizing my deadlines. I do my best. Also, I have a really supportive family. My mom lives nearby, and if things are like too out of control, I can be like, can I drop them off? And they'll go over there and have dinner and go swimming, and I can work on whatever I need to work on. And my husband is extremely supportive of my career, and he's also very helpful. And we just takes a village, not to be corny, but like everyone is invested in me being able to fulfill these dreams, basically.
Yeah, I mean, having that support system is huge. And so I guess I'm curious how supportive you felt the program has been. Like, if you needed some flexibility because of these other responsibilities, have they accommodated you?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Anybody who's worked with me for any length of time is an accommodating person. Because, yeah, there are definitely days where I'm like, I'm so sorry. Deadline has to be 2 days from now. I can't. And they get it. They know about my life. Like, we all talk a lot. We all have Zooms. Anytime we have class Zooms, my 2 8-year-olds are like dancing in the background and running through the room, and I have to stop and make dinner for them. And, so everyone knows, and everyone is really flexible and really kind and allowing me to be flexible.
Great. Okay, so according to the program website, students work one-on-one online with writing faculty and in person at 5 10-day residencies that are spread out over those 2 years in the program. So we'll talk about the residencies in a moment, but what is the day-to-day like in the program when working online outside of those residencies?
Well, we have Blackboard or Canvas, and we have to go and read lectures and different essays or pieces of fiction, and have discussions about them. And then we have to read about 5 books a month and write critical papers on them. We have Zoom meetings that are like book discussions or class discussions. It's a lot of work. It really is. It's so much work, but it is manageable if you just like stick with it and work at it every day. And the work, it's none of it is really busy work. Like, all of it is really made me so much better as a writer and a reader and just navigating this space in general. I wouldn't say that I felt like any of, sometimes when you're in school and they give you work and you're like, this is such bullshit. Like, why am I, no, you don't want to read this. I don't want to write this. This is stupid. Like, none of it has felt that way. I feel like everything has been valid and has helped me, and I'm not resentful about any of it, basically.
Okay, so the website mentions that you work one-on-one with faculty online. So it sounds like you're meeting on Canvas, you're doing Zoom meetings as a class to discuss. But how often are you like communicating one-on-one with faculty when you're not at the residencies?
Well, the emails are like open. We communicate usually through email. I mean, I could call my professors or FaceTime with them if I needed to. But mostly we've had email back and forth. Also there, we turn in, as well as our critical work, we turn in creative work every packet, and they're like really involved with that in editing and giving notes and just a constant back and forth. It's a low residency program, so it's a lot through the internet, but it's still pretty meaty. I feel like the communication is open with whatever you need.
And you mentioned that the residencies in Palm Springs were a huge draw for you. So paint us a picture of what those 10-day stints are like.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, they call this program, as like a pun, the hottest MFA program, because it is like 100 degrees sometimes when you're in Palm Springs, but I mean, it is, it's a lot of fun. Certainly when you're in Palm Springs for those 10 days, you're staying at this resort in Palm Springs, the Omni, and there's like these amazing pools and a lot of amazing restaurants nearby, and they do a student reading at the R Bar, which is like a little bar at the hotel. Everyone goes and you sign up for the reading, and everyone is super supportive, and that's a total blast. Last time we had a karaoke night, which was insane and unhinged and so fun. And during the day, we all have breakfast together, and then we're in workshops, and then we have these lectures. Todd brings in, different writers and different agents and publishers, and they'll give different lectures and have discussions. So we go to those. We're supposed to go to 10 of those a week, 10 of those for the 10 days. So we can pick which ones. And then we also have grad lectures for the students who are graduating. So we'll all try to support, our buds and go to those. Also, I feel like I haven't even mentioned this enough, but basically all of my best friends now are my friends from the program. We all hang out constantly when we're not there. We're all at each other's birthday parties. All of our kids are friends. It's, we've really become a family together in this program. It's incredible.
So even though you're in this low residency program where you're not together all the time, you feel like you've been able to build a pretty good community with the other writers in the program?
Oh, absolutely. Because, you know how it is in workshop. You're reading each other's deepest, darkest thoughts often, and it's a really vulnerable time. And so it's really easy to get close with people really quickly. And at the end of the residency, we have a graduation for the graduating students, and that's always a blast. And, it's just a really supportive program. Everyone is so supportive of each other, and we're all like each other's cheerleaders and really invested in each other's success.
Okay, well, I want to ask a question about money related to the residencies, but also just related to the program in general, because usually low residency programs, because you're not on campus, there's not really opportunities for teaching assistantships. So there's usually fewer funding opportunities. There might be some fellowships. So I'm curious, number one, if you know of any kind of funding opportunities in your program, and two, how the residencies work. Are those included in the tuition that you're paying for the school, or are you paying extra to go to those residencies?
They are included in the tuition, and also breakfast and lunch is included. The only thing that you have to pay for is dinner, but the stay is included. And I have had to get student loans. I'm paying for all of it with student loans. When I was first accepted into the program, I also applied for a scholarship, and they give the scholarship to one person in the new oncoming class, and I got that scholarship.
Great, congrats!
Thanks. Yeah, so you just send in a writing sample, and so they do offer things, and honestly, it's so worth the money to me. It's changed my life so much.
Well, that all sounds great, and I'm really glad that you've had such a good experience with it. And before we go, I want to give you the last word. So what I've been asking people this season is, what is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
Oh, it's been so much better. So much better, because when I applied, I was like, oh, I need something to keep me busy and keep propelling my career forward, even though I'm stuck at home. And I really just thought I was going to be doing this online program that, I'd be left up to my own devices in a lot of ways. But really, it's changed my life 100%. Like I said, all of my best friends are in the program. I'm really close with my professors. I can't even articulate exactly how much the program has meant to me. I just feel like I sound so corny and cheesy, but it really has changed my life in such a big way. And I'm such a better writer now too. It's been wonderful.
I'm glad to hear it. And I really appreciate you coming here and sharing some of your experiences with us, and some of that knowledge that you have about journalism and doing the program and everything. It's really been nice talking to you. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been nice talking to you too.